770 new laws in California and the dumbest bill in America. This is Mark Fisher with Mark and the Millennials. And the Millennial joining me today is, of course, Christopher Hopkins, our producer. Welcome, everyone, to Mark and the Millennials. This particular podcast is called 770 New Laws in California. Yeah, and the dumbest bill in America. And if you ever wonder why we have the dumbest bill in America, it's because so many states and the federal government keep passing more and more bills, and we will get to that. But in California, there are 770 new laws that were just signed by Governor Newsom in California. And one such bill is a bill that we've been talking about for almost a year and a half, and that is the Gender Neutral Stores Bill in California. It was one of our previous dumbest bills in America. It is now the law in California. We told you this was percolating through the California legislature a year and a half ago, and here it is, got to the governor's desk, Governor Newsom's desk, and he signed it. He signed it. And so what does it do? Well, it mandates gender-neutral toy aisles for large retailers. So California Democrat Governor Newsom signed into law Saturday a mandate for large retailers to keep a gender-neutral aisle for children's toys. The state law requires stores with 500 or more employees to maintain a gender-neutral section or area with children's items and toys, excluding clothes, regardless of whether those items have traditionally been marketed for either boys or girls. So if you have a large department store and you are in California, you have to separate your actual aisles. Instead of with boys here and girls there, it's now, gender neutral. It's all kind of like mixed and mismatched together. And that way the parents can go in there and get totally confused. And the kid can get confused too, because it's not you that gets to decide where you shop. It's the state that gets to decide how you shop and where you shop in California. And we have talked about this before in the dumbest bill in America, but there's also the other issue too, which is so much of retail is going online. Don't doubt me about this, podcast listeners. I can guarantee you that the next bill California will pass, probably sometime in a year or two, will be a bill that says, well, since everything's gone online and so many large department stores and retailers are no longer operating in California for all kinds of reasons, not the least of which is the theft, of course, and the squalor that's in the state, we're going to make online retailers display all of their online materials in a gender-neutral way. That's coming. That's absolutely coming. But there are 770 new laws in California. These are the kinds of laws, podcast listeners, that get passed when states and governments lose and run out of ideas, really good ideas for laws. Because you see, when you're a Democrat, you have to go home and justify to your voters how many quantity of laws that you passed. It's all about quantity. It's not about quality of laws. And let's face it, as a conservative, I think there are way too many laws. And there are many folks, by the way, who very much agree with me, some of them on both sides of the aisle. But let's face it, most Democrats are all about how many laws can we pass. But this is what happens in a state like California when you have so many laws already, you run out of ideas. And so you're trying to find more and more ideas. And before you know it, you are completely and utterly encroaching on every aspect of human freedom, which means you're limiting human freedom. And another such bill of the 770 bills that were passed in California and signed by Governor Newsom was the bill that says that if you remove a condom while having intercourse without consent, that would be, of course, a felony, or at the very least, you would be fined and probably, go to jail. So that's California getting involved in your bedroom, which of course is what California is all about now. It's so funny, right? Democrats have been saying for years, we don't want to get involved in your bedroom. It's the Republicans that do. And here is California, one bill after another. By the way, here's another one of their 770 really important bills. Banning the sale of gas-powered lawn equipment by 2024. So in California, if you have gas-powered lawn equipment, or if you have, let's just say, a pretty robust landscaping project at your house, and you don't think the electric equipment is going to really do the job, you're not going to be able to buy that equipment in California. And of course, what's the next thing that's going to happen is if you absolutely have that same equipment in 2024, because you just bought it this year or next year, they're going to probably say you can no longer even use it. That's what a ban is, right? This is what authoritarian governments do when they run out of ideas for legislation. They keep passing more and more. 770 new laws in California passed and were signed by Governor Newsom. And those bills affect every aspect of your life. Banning the sale of gas-powered lawn equipment. Removing condoms without consent during sexual intercourse. I'm sorry, but you need a government involved at that particular point in time. They're not saying that you don't have consent to have sex, that's happening, but that if so how do you prove that? I mean, we were talking about this the other day. It's one of the dumbest bills because how do you prove it? And that's going to be in court, and you're going to be talking about proof and how, right? I mean, is there going to be a video camera in the bedroom? I mean, is that the next thing? And the government's going to go, we're going to pass a bill to require a video camera in the bedroom to make sure those men don't do that. I mean, this is what happens in a modern dystopia such as California. And then, of course, the other one, which is free menstrual products in public education from K to 12, as well as in college campuses, certainly the community college campuses, because they're government campuses, as well as the state university system in California. And we're going to talk about that later in the dumbest bill in America. And that's 770 new laws, folks. How many times have we told you that when you allow this to happen in a state, when you keep electing people and they convince you that the only way you're safe is if we just bring home more and more passed laws, and that's the only, as if laws really, really do make us safe, such as the laws about gender-neutral department stores. Well, to make fun of it, Texas won't force stores to have gender-neutral toy aisles. The state of California, having solved all the issues facing the state, passed a bill recently that would force large retailers to have gender-neutral toy aisles. Beginning in 2024, California Governor Gavin Newsom gleefully signed the bill into law over the weekend, according to KXAN. The law in California targets stores with 500 or more employees, and they have to display a reasonable selection of toys in the gender-neutral selection. Under the bill, California retailers with 500 or more employees must display a reasonable selection of toys from its boys and girls sections into another non-gendered section, regardless of how those toys are marked. Still, stores that violate the order will face a civil penalty of up to $250 and a first violation, and $500 for subsequent violations. AB 1084 not only hopes to ease shopping worries for children who are still working to understand their gender identities, but its authors hope it helps chip away at gender stereotypes. There's a stereotype when you're a dude. It's like you're a biological male. There's a stereotype. And this is what happens in states when they get out of control and continue to pass more and more legislation impacting every single aspect of our lives, including the most private aspects, which are none of the state's business. So Greg Abbott, the governor of Texas, tweets out, California mandates gender-neutral toy aisles for large retailers. Not in Texas. In Texas, it is businesses, not government, that decide how they display their merchandise. Oh, by the way to go, Greg Abbott, which makes perfect sense. And you want to know something else? It's parents, not the state, that decide what stores those parents want to go into and shop. Right? And it's parents who decide where their children get to go and shop as well, because the children belong to the parents. They don't belong to the state, California, just so you know. And so that was Greg Abbott tweeting out in response to good old Gavin Newsom tweeting his glee for this new bill, which of course is just stupid and makes no sense whatsoever. And Greg Abbott's like, look, if you're a business, it's your business. You decide what you sell. You decide how you display it. It's your merchandise because it's your business. And guess what? It's a miracle. People get to decide whether they want to walk into your store or not. Imagine that. I mean, can you imagine that that's actually what freedom is really about? You get to say, well, you know what? I really don't like that store because I don't like the way they display certain things in the store, so I'm not going to go there. And if you're triggered, don't go. Don't go, right? It's okay. So that's one of the 770 bills. And then there is the other one, which is Newsom signs bill banning sale of gas-powered lawnmowers and leaf blowers and chainsaws as early as 2024 because of climate change, naturally. So in Cal Matters magazine, it's a magazine that chronicles all the bills in their processes through the 2-year legislative process in California. And then whether or not the governor signs the bills or not. Cal Matters, of course, talks about the top 21 bills of 21. And it's the governor's final say and just goes on and on to talk about number one, the number one priority. In California, folks, listen to this. The number one priority for Gavin Newsom was signing that gender-neutral toy section bill. Number two, a free press at protests. Isn't that kind of obvious? If the press wants to go to a protest and they want to cover the protest, then I'm not really sure California needs to pass a bill to let the press report freely about protests. But they passed that bill. Okay, fine. Once again, they're trying to find more bills to pass that already are law. Massive expansion to college financial aid, of course, because that's a payoff to the illegal alien community. Cost-free COVID testing. All right, that makes sense. Ethnic studies to graduate. That was also one of our dumbest bills. So Governor Newsom passed, the legislature passed in California, and Governor Newsom signed ethnic studies to graduate, which of course is tribalism and creating tribes so that people say, well, what tribe are you from? Oh, okay, well, I don't like that tribe. I'm from the better tribe, and your tribe has white privilege. Mine doesn't have white privilege. So therefore, you are on the top of the food chain, and I'm on the bottom, and we need to upend that. Teaching mental health in public schools. Okay, sounds like a great idea and kind of makes sense, except that in California, what they're really doing is trying to inculcate transgenderism in public schools. I'm sure there is some good in teaching mental health, obviously, because many people have developed mental health issues because of the pandemic. We know that. But in California, it's all about getting involved in your personal sexual proclivities and trying to sexualize children as young as they possibly can. That's exactly what the California Democrats wanted to do, always. And another bill that was one of his top priorities in California, removing condoms without consent. So you're having sex with consent, but the condom falls off and now you're a bad person. And so the bill would make it illegal to remove a condom without consent during sexual intercourse. The bill by Democrat Assembly member Cristina Garcia of Downey, California, would make it so that stealthing, non-consensual condom removal, that's what stealthing is apparently in California, be considered sexual battery under the state civil code, allowing victims to sue their partners for damages. So, of course, lawyers are going to love that bill. And that was also one of our dumbest bills. Thank you, California. You keep giving us so many dumbest bills. And so this goes on and on and on. It's unbelievable. This 770 bill nut job thing in California that they just keep passing. And I just have to say, I'm very proud at Mark and the Millennials that we have called out so many of these so far in advance when they weren't even close to becoming law. And now here are so many of these bills having become law because Newsom signed them. And people in California, of course, and across the country are just waking up. I mean, I just heard last night Tucker Carlson talking for the first time about the gender neutral stores bills in California. And I'm thinking, well, you know what? We were reporting that a long time ago, and I'm glad Tucker brought national attention to this. But the time to have really done this for all of the news programs would have been when the bill actually was being heard in committee so that it could be killed very, very early. So next up, podcast listeners, we have education dystopia in Virginia. Yes, education dystopia in Virginia. If you ever wonder how out of control our public school systems are across the country, there's no better place to look than in Fairfax County and Loudoun County, Virginia. Just as examples, by the way, please look in your own backyards too, because I'm pretty sure that it's in your local public education system. There are some very bad people who are scheming to put in really crazy school boards, if they haven't already, and who want to do the same thing to your public schools as California has done to its public schools. So in Loudoun County, Virginia, schools tried to conceal a sexual assault against a daughter in the bathroom, a father says. So a father who has a daughter in the Loudoun County public school system said that the Loudoun County public school system, including the school board and the administration, tried to silence him and try to say that a sexual assault did not happen. On June 22nd, Scott Smith was arrested at a Loudoun County school board meeting, a meeting that was ultimately deemed an unlawful assembly after many attendees vocally opposed a policy on transgender students. Now, this was all reported, but what's different is now the truth is coming out. What people did not know is that weeks prior, on May 28th, Mr. Smith says a boy, allegedly wearing a skirt, entered a girl's bathroom at nearby Stonebridge High School, where he sexually assaulted Smith's 9th grade daughter. Juvenile records are sealed, but Smith's attorney, Elizabeth Lancaster, told the Daily Wire that a boy was charged with 2 counts of forcible sodomy, 1 count of anal sodomy, and 1 count of forcible fellatio related to an incident that day at the school. Quote, if someone would have sat and listened for 30 seconds to what Scott had to say, they would have been mortified and heartbroken, Scott's attorney Elizabeth Lancaster said. As a result of the viral video showing his arrest at the Loudoun County School Board, Smith, the dad, became the poster child for what the National School Boards Association has since suggested could be a form of domestic terrorism. A white, blue-collar male who showed up to harangue obscure public servants on his local school board. If someone would have sat and listened for 30 seconds to what Scott had to say, they would have been mortified and heartbroken, Lancaster said. Minutes before Smith's arrest, the Loudoun County Public School System superintendent lectured the public that concerns about the transgender policy were misplaced because the school system had no record of any assault occurring in any school bathroom. I mean, folks, then this guy, of course, this happened a few months ago, but now the truth is finally coming out. So a person, a boy, high school boy, goes into a girl's bathroom. He allegedly is identifying as a transgender, allegedly, this high school boy, wearing a skirt, and then sexually assaults Mr. Smith's daughter, who is in the proper bathroom because she is a biological female. And this is the craziness that's going on in public schools. And if you try to say this, of course, if you try to say this as, and you're an employee of a major company and so forth, you might get canceled. You might get fired. That might actually happen. And yet everybody knows that all of this nonsense, and it is nonsense, it doesn't belong in the public school setting. That is not the function of public schools. And so we have an educational dystopia in Virginia. Here, podcast listeners, is the audio and video, and it's hard to make out the actual words and so forth. But here's the struggle that occurred when Mr. Smith was at that Loudoun County School Board meeting, and all he wanted to do was talk to the school board in an open mic setting and bring transparency to what had happened to his daughter. And do so after the superintendent of the public school system made the allegation that transgenderism isn't a big deal. Nothing could go wrong. There isn't anything wrong with it. We're normalizing it in the public school system because that's the appropriate place to put it. Well, here is the clip. You have to listen to this. Here it is.
She's trying to disrupt things. She's trying to disrupt things. Let's continue on over here. Let's continue on.
So Mr. Smith had a support group there, and he was the one that was being arrested. Obviously, that was a woman saying that. I believe that's his wife or one of his supporters. And he was just there trying to get to the microphone to speak. And what had happened was, because he had already complained to the public school system, between the superintendent, the public school system, and the school board, they made the local police known. They let them know that Mr. Smith was going to attend and that he should not be allowed to speak. So they intentionally wouldn't allow a father to speak up about a policy that has resulted in his daughter being sexually assaulted in Loudoun County Public Schools as a result of the crazy policies where the public school system is so hyper-focused and on sexualizing children in every way imaginable. Children, that they think parents don't have a say anymore in the public education. It's unbelievable. And speaking of which, a parents group sounds an alarm over Merrick Garland, the Attorney General of the United States, his ties to pro-CRT and Zuckerberg-backed consultancy. So a parents group is questioning Attorney General Merrick Garland's decision to open an investigation into purported threats and acts of violence against school boards across the United States after the group discovered that the Attorney General's son-in-law is the co-founder of an education company that uses critical race theory in its work. So Merrick Garland's son-in-law is involved in such a company. Earlier this week, Merrick Garland directed the FBI and U.S. attorney's offices to investigate alleged threats being made against school board officials by parents who have spoken out against the use of critical race theory and other racially charged teachings in the classroom, among other issues. Like, by the way, podcast listeners, Mr. Smith's issue about his daughter not able to speak. But of course, I'm sure he's going to be considered a white supremacist and a threat by the FBI. Merrick Garland's direction came after a National School Boards Association wrote to the Biden administration that parents were engaged in domestic terrorism. Asra Nomani, vice president of investigations and strategy at Parents Defending Education, wrote in a tweet Tuesday that the Attorney General has declared a war on parents. His daughter is married to the co-founder of Panorama Ed, which is under fire for its multi-million-dollar contracts with school boards, she added. At Defending Ed, parents sent us tips. We raised the alarm. Now Garland is trying to silence parents. It's unbelievable. And that's exactly what he's trying to do. And also in the Daily Wire, Attorney General Garland linked to firm that stores psychological profiles of students, avoids parental consent. More than 1/5 of the nation's largest 100 school districts have contracts with a critical race theory tinged firm co-founded by the son-in-law of Attorney General Merrick Garland, who recently raised the specter of involving the FBI against parents who expressed anger over CRT and other issues at school board meetings. Garland's daughter is married to Zan Tanner, a co-founder of Panorama Education, which issues surveys to students asking if they are feeling gender fluid, and asks, how confident are you that students at your school can have honest conversations with each other about race? At least one district's contract says all the personal student data is sent to the company, which is funded by Facebook's Mark Zuckerberg under a loophole that circumvents a requirement for parental consent by counting the for-profit company as a school official and not an outside vendor. Panorama, which is the company that's collecting this data, which focuses on social, emotional learning and surveys that gauge the feelings of parents, students, and staff, has among the broadest tentacles of any educational consultant. At least 22 of the nation's largest 100 school districts have paid Panorama a combined $12 million in recent years, with the 23rd school system to pay it millions more, a Daily Wire review found. And so the article continues, as you can imagine, there's a little bit of a conflict of interest with the Attorney General of the United States and his daughter's husband, who are engaging in sexualizing students and dividing students into tribes. It's just disgusting. It's just disgusting. And podcast listeners, look, this is not the only school system in Loudoun County, Virginia, and Fairfax County, Virginia. These are not the only school systems that are collecting data on your children. In my own home state, podcast listeners, in my own home state, there are bills every session. Every session there are bills. And those bills deal with what they call student data privacy. It's amazing. And the bills allege that the state needs to strengthen and expand student data privacy. One such bill happened this last session. It was House Bill 1062, and it did pass. It did pass. And the bill alleges that we need to do a better job controlling and making sure that student data privacy exists. But there's only one problem with the bill. The bill spells out all, or at least some, of the items that the school systems are collecting on your children. And guess what, podcast listeners? You don't get to opt out as a parent. The school system gets to collect this information without your consent. And you as the parent don't have an opt-out. You as the parent don't even have the option of saying, well, after the child graduates, just as a stopgap, right? After the child graduates in 12th grade, shouldn't all that information be completely and utterly lost, eliminated, erased? Oh, no. That information is kept by the school system forever. And I'm not talking about the basic information that you're probably thinking of, like the students' grades. Okay. Oh, no. So the reason why this bill was problematic and so many dislike it is because every year there's a new bill in our legislature, and this is happening across the country, that enables and empowers public school systems to collect more and more personal and very personal information on your children. It's incredibly dangerous. Here are a few examples. First, educational and disciplinary records as defined in the article. So your educational records, which of course is going to include your disciplinary records. Here, this bill says, well, we're going to eliminate that term disciplinary. No, they're going to collect all of your educational records. That's dangerous. Without your consent, you don't get to decide, parents, what records are considered educational. The first and last name of the student, that's fine. Home address, geolocation information, telephone number, electronic mail address, or other information that allows physical or online contact, test grades, student evaluations, special education information, criminal records, medical records and health records. Oh, here we go. So medical records, right? Usually you would say that makes sense because my child is a diabetic. They need more information. They need assistance. Okay, fine. But the term medical and health records keeps expanding. Social security number, biometric information. Biometric information? They need fingerprints. They need eye scans. Why? Socioeconomic information. Why? Food purchases. Why? Political and religious affiliations. Why? Text messages. Why? Student identifiers. Why? Search activity, as in the activity that your child searches online. Why? Photos. Well, what kind of photos? You mean just the photo of the kid, like a headshot of the child from, their chest up to make sure that you can identify the child in a student ID? Or are there other photos that you're including? And if so, what are they and why? Voice recordings. Why? Disciplinary information. Online behavior or usage of applications when linked or linkable to a specific student. Confidential information as defined by the school system. So, podcast listeners, that's just some of the stuff that's being collected. You and I both know that there's so much more information that's being collected about your student. And because the school system, the school boards, the superintendents, the consultants who are making millions from these school boards keep going back and saying, you need to collect this additional information because it's going to be useful. And you don't need to get the parents' consent because, we public safety. That's what, it's all about the children. Yeah, we need to save the children. No, parents are in charge. Parents are in charge. So to push back on this, North Carolina Lieutenant Governor says he won't resign after blasting schools for teaching graphic sexual concepts to kids. Awesome. So North Carolina Lieutenant Governor Mark Robinson. This guy is one of my heroes, by the way. He is the Lieutenant Governor of North Carolina. In North Carolina, the governor and the lieutenant governor are elected separately, not as a team. So in North Carolina, they have a Democrat governor and a Republican who is a lieutenant governor, and Mark Robinson is a black Republican. Well, already, as you can imagine, the Democrats are having a hard time with that and have had since he was elected. Well, he says he will not bow to calls for him to resign after he blasted schools for teaching sexual concepts to young children. The Republican outraged the left when he said that LGBT issues and sexual concepts should not be taught to children in public schools while speaking at the Asbury Baptist Church in June. Quote, there's no reason anybody anywhere in America should be telling any child about transgenderism, homosexuality, any of that filth, he said during the event, video of which he was recently posted online by far-left activists. And yes, I called it filth. If you don't like that, I called it filth. Come see me and I will explain it to you. That's the lieutenant governor. So Senator Jeff Jackson of North Carolina's lieutenant, he says, North Carolina's lieutenant governor, Mark Robinson, just angrily referred to the LGBTQ community as filth. Then he says, yes, I call it filth. And of course, then he tweets out the information. And Senator Wiley Nickel says, I agree with Jeff Jackson. Mark Robinson is a disgrace and an embarrassment to our state. He should resign. He should be canceled. Right, because God forbid, he actually has a view that these things ought not be promoted in the public school environment. That was what he was saying. But you know what, podcast listeners? Judge for yourself. We have that clip for you to listen to. Here is the lieutenant governor of the state of North Carolina. Here it is.
I'm saying this now, and I've been saying it, and I don't care who likes it. Those issues have no place in a school. There's no reason anybody anywhere in America should be telling any child about transgenderism, homosexuality, any of that filth. And yes, I called it filth. And if you don't like it that I called it filth, come see me and I'll explain it to you.
So look, that is the view of the lieutenant governor. And his point is, and of course he can certainly speak for himself, that why is this all in public schools? And I think this is what's happening in America right now, is parents and many elected officials are just like, why can't we just return to character-based education and the basics of teaching in public schools? And when we teach health courses, then we teach them based on character-based education. Why do we have to keep expanding this to say to children, you can use any bathroom, you really aren't a boy, you really aren't a girl, you can be whatever you want to be with respect to your gender, when that's scientifically not so? And increasingly, what you're seeing, just like in Loudoun County, Virginia, you're seeing these sexual assaults being covered up. And they're being covered up because children are being so sexualized by the public school system that they're thinking that it's okay to do these things in the public school system. And so then you have the North Carolina lieutenant governor speaking out and saying, look, this is enough. This is enough. It doesn't belong in the public school system. As soon as these children go home, by all means, they should have conversations with their parents, and we should encourage parents to have those conversations with their children. We've said this many times, and increasingly, we might actually have a Republican governor of Virginia over this very issue of all this stuff that's happening in Loudoun County and Fairfax County, Virginia, as everyone knows, because it is basically ground zero for the pushback against the wokeness and craziness in public schools. And so that's the lieutenant governor, of course, blasting the school system. I mean, obviously, there are different ways of saying things, when you want to talk, but that's his view, and he's in a church, and those are his religious views. So next up, podcast listeners, climate zealots go tribal. It's a religion, by the way. This tribalism that has started with the climate crazies, it's become a religion. So climate protesters swarm the White House, and in the process, of course, they vandalize the Jackson statue, and they warn President Biden. They warn him. Left-wing climate protesters hit the D.C. streets Monday, vandalizing a statue of former President Andrew Jackson and swarming the White House while warning President Biden to take their demands seriously. Because, of course, if you are about the environment, you naturally have to destroy statues. And, of course, I'm pretty sure that President Andrew Jackson was never really someone who was anti-climate or pro-climate, because back then it was all about just survival. But naturally, when you're a leftist, you have to just knock things down, because that's the only way you feel like you can actually, make progress, because leftists don't build anything. They only break things. The Build Back Fossil Free Coalition, oh yeah, there you go. They've got to build back fossil free after they destroy everything, took to the DC streets on Monday with their 5-day-long protests aimed to spur action by the Biden administration against climate change, mainly by declaring a national emergency and ending projects involved in fossil fuels. Imagine that, right? The climate people have declared a national emergency. Well, we have a national emergency in place now with a pandemic, and it has wreaked havoc on everyone's lives. Not just the pandemic, but government has made it far worse. Can you imagine giving government the authority to declare a national climate emergency, and what would happen to our lives? What would happen to our country? What would happen to freedoms? Quote, people are dying right now from the pollutants, the toxins, the climate catastrophes that are happening, and we have to stop them, Mopin wrote. Biden's election was riding on climate change. His entire election hinged on turning out people of color and indigenous people. But when it really comes to what matters, our lives are still being sacrificed for oil and gas, Mopin continued. That's why we're here today. So far, Monday's protest has seen the U.S. Park Police warn of police action should the demonstrators not disperse, and a protester arrested while screaming she did not want to die. And of course, that was a protester who was outside the White House. She was being arrested because she was unruly. I think she was probably trying to cross into the White House grounds, the climate insurrection. And then, of course, she got arrested, and she's saying, I don't want to die. I don't want to die. What she's really talking about is her religious views about the climate, because it's a religious matter to her, rather than being reasonable and actually talk about point by point, issue by issue, how we solve problems. They just take the whole thing on as a religion and say there must be a national emergency, and we, the climate gods, will come in and we will then control every aspect of your lives and every aspect of government. We have a clip of this individual, and you can hear her in the background. And this is proof, podcast listeners, that these individuals, it's a religion. We have the clip, and here it is.
My name is Erica. Stop it, you dummy talk, baby. I'm in Rome with the Crow Creek Sioux Tribe. I'm a descendant of those that they put on the ship and raped. Help me, please. Help me. I love my children so much. I love my children so much. I love my children so much. Let me go. Let me go. I want to just tell my dad that I really love him. Tell my mom that I love him and that I tried and I want to live. I don't want to die. I don't want to die.
So that is a very religious climate person there who's taken on as a religion. And she's saying, I love my children. I love my children so much. I don't want to die. Her children aren't there with her, podcast listeners. They're not there with her. She's saying that because she's saying that she and her children are going to die unless there is a complete takeover of the entire United States of America by these very individuals, telling you what you can and can't do, every aspect of your life, rather than dealing with each individual specific problem that has to be addressed to improve the environment and to make things better. They can't do that. They can't have that conversation. They are so incredibly brainwashed. It's unbelievable. So she's like, I'm going to die. I'm going to die. And my children are going to die. And on. Meanwhile, she's being arrested because she's out of control. And at least one there. So she's the one that was arrested there, according to New York Post. And New York Post says at least one person was arrested Monday during a raucous climate change protest outside the White House on Indigenous Peoples Day. Yeah, not Columbus Day. Indigenous Peoples Day, where a large group of indigenous people gathered to urge President Biden to stop approving fossil fuel projects and declare a national climate emergency. Yeah, so then President Biden, let's just say he did that. And then we had cold spells in different parts of the country. Then people would die from not having sufficient heat. That's how stupid these people are. They're just stupid. They are complete religious zealots, these climate people, the climate zombies. They're religious zealots. They have no knowledge of anything because of the fact that they are completely and utterly brainwashed by this ideology. Dozens of people gathered in front of the White House carrying signs that read, "Protect Native Lands," "Biden, reject fossil fuel projects," and "Defund Line 3 to kick off a week of demonstrations after marching from Freedom Plaza to the White House." The protest got heated as one arrested and others pushed up against the U.S. Secret Service through a temporary fence. The indigenous woman arrested was detained by Secret Service officers after she allegedly threw something over the fence of the White House. She was heard screaming, "I don't want to die," throughout the protests, and then just went on and on and on. And that's in the New York Post. And of course, Axios also reports, in photos, Indigenous Peoples Day celebrations highlight climate change, indigenous lands. Yeah. So, Axios, of course, they're famous for naturally saying how these individuals are not insurrectionists. In no way. They're not dangerous. If they ever got in control, you have no worries whatsoever. There's nothing to be concerned about whatsoever. These people are exactly who we want in charge. In fact, by the way, podcast listeners, I'm pretty sure these people are already in charge in the White House, except that they're probably protesting at the wrong White House. They probably should go to the fake White House set because that's where Biden already is. He's always at the fake White House set. He's never in the real White House, although the real decisions get made in the real White House. And the fake White House, of course, those are where all the fake decisions get made. So, podcast listeners, the pandemic has forced financial education for parents and their children. And there's this great article in the Wall Street Journal that is definitely worth looking into if you have an opportunity. It says, when the pandemic forced young adults to move back home because they lost their jobs or they couldn't find a job, they got a financial education. They weren't the only ones who benefited. Their parents got some money lessons as well. So countless young adults have moved back home during the COVID-19 pandemic. By the way, that's still happening. At first, it was mostly a good way to navigate the lockdown, spend time with family, and save money. But for many parents and children, it turned out to be something more, an opportunity for both of them to learn some important financial lessons. The pandemic, it seems, was an ideal backdrop for families to put their finances under the microscope and learn from each other as they adjusted to living under the same roof again. Parents and their adult children were able to pick up one another's good financial habits and drop bad ones. And the experience has also helped some young adults rethink their financial goals. We have a tendency to think that more about the future when we're faced with a stressor, says Brad Klontz, a financial psychologist and professor at Creighton University in Omaha, Nebraska. The growing openness of young adults to talking finances with their parents and peers, he says, reflects a kind of tribal response in people to the stress of the pandemic. Here's a look at what the adult children and parents in the three families learned about money and themselves. So one of them was the parents gave a deadline to move out. And let me see, another was breaking the money taboo. In other words, asking for contributions as long as you're living there. And another is a new outlook, which is the idea of paying rent and so forth. And it's really kind of interesting because so many people, particularly millennials, have moved back home with their parents. And this raises the specter of a much larger problem across the country. And that is children aren't really taught to be financially ready by the public school system in K to 12. And it's really something that should happen. We've briefly spoken about this before. And so perhaps if we spent a little less time teaching children about the importance of transgenderism and how you too can have a child, and that child that you have, you can even have it if you're a man, before teaching children these concepts which simply aren't true, namely that a man really isn't a man biologically and a woman really isn't a woman biologically, that biology doesn't exist. Before teaching all of that crap, why don't we actually teach children how to manage money, how to make money, how our economy works, how they can succeed in our economy, how they should always be prepared for when bad things happen or economic events happen so that they are ready and they are prepared. And it's like, well, geez, today I lost my job or I got laid off. But the good news is I've been saving for several years and I'm okay to pay my bills while I go ahead and look for that next job. So if you're a parent, you were already doing this because, you're the parent. You don't really have an option. You had to save a lot because you have children already and you had to be ready for those bad things that happen. But for some reason, that hasn't translated to so many children. And part of the reason it hasn't translated is because parents, to be fair, haven't taught it. They haven't taught the children about financial education. And then the other reason is the school system really would be helpful to have a more structured financial education kind of course requirement in public schools. And it really should start in kindergarten. It's very simple, right? You said your kindergarten, hey, look, when you go into the local 7-Eleven and you buy a candy bar, and the candy bar costs 85 cents. You give them $1. How much money do you get back? And then you ask the kid, well, how did you get the $1 to pay for the candy bar? The kid's probably gonna say, well, I got it from my parents. But what if you didn't get it from your parents? How would you make that $1 to pay for that candy bar? And then you go down that road and it's very simple. And then middle school becomes more sophisticated. And then high school, it's about managing your checking account and paying online bills and managing your money and understanding that you have fixed costs each month and they have to be covered, those fixed costs. And then when you have extra money left over, ideally you want to save some of it if you can. And the other part of the money is for fun stuff. Teaching those things, I have to tell you, there are virtually no kids out there, no young adults either, who are ready by the time they get into college. And in many cases, even when they get out, they don't know. Because they weren't taught. How's that possible in our country to not be teaching this? So the Wall Street Journal is saying, look, these kids came home during the pandemic. They're young adults, actually. But they came home. They're the kids that came home to their parents to live with their parents because the kids lost their jobs during the pandemic. And things didn't work out so well. Government made it worse, let's face it. And then they go home. And only then when they're in their mid to late 20s, sometimes even early 30s, they're finally having the conversation with their parents about, hey, I got to figure out how to manage my money. You know? And the parents were like, that's really cool, but let's have another conversation. That conversation is, now that you're living here, I kind of need you to help me pay the mortgage. You need to pay rent because it's going to cost more for you to be here. You're going to use more electricity. You're going to use more water. You're getting free rent, but you need to pay something. There needs to be some sort of exchange between us to be able to use this space. And you're teaching your child the same kind of skills that should have been taught to them probably 10 years prior, but isn't being taught at all in the public school system. And God knows it's not being taught at home at all. At all. So next up, podcast listeners, we have the dumbest bill in America. And do we have a lead up, Mr. Producer? Here it is.
Dum 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 dum.
And it's the dumbest bill in America, and it is free menstrual products in California schools. Yeah, you heard that. Free menstrual products in California schools. We're going to take on this taboo item. Yes, we are. And this is one of the 770 bills signed by Gavin Newsom in California, because after all, when you have people on the streets in California and you have drug addicts everywhere and crime is out of control and people are shooting up all over the streets because, you know, it's all about free drugs and so forth throughout California. And when you have people robbing stores and not putting them in jail after they rob the stores, they keep robbing them again and again and again. And then the stores, like these national pharmacies like Walgreens and CVS and so forth, start shutting down. You don't want to address those problems. No, you want to pass a law to give free menstrual products in California schools. Oh, yes. So Governor Newsom, according to KTLA5, says he signs a bill requiring free menstrual products in California's public schools and colleges. California public schools and colleges must stock their restrooms with free menstrual products under a bill signed Friday by Governor Gavin Newsom. The move comes as women's rights advocates push nationwide for affordable access to pads, tampons, and other items. California's latest efforts build on a 2017 law requiring low-income schools in disadvantaged areas to provide students with free menstrual products. It expands the law to include grades 6 to 12. So the law now is expanded to grades 6 to 12. Community colleges and the California State University and University of California systems starting in the 2022-23 school year. It encourages private schools and colleges to follow suit. Quote, our biology doesn't always send an advanced warning when we're about to start menstruating, which often means we need to stop whatever we're doing and deal with a period, Democrat Assemblywoman Cristina Garcia said of her legislation. Quote, just as toilet paper and paper towels are provided in virtually every public bathrooms, so should menstrual products. Several other states were considering or have required free menstrual products in public schools, according to advocacy group Women's Voices for the Earth. Purdue University in Indiana decided last year to offer free feminine hygiene products in campus bathrooms. Quote, California joins a growing number of states who lead the way in demonstrating that menstrual equity is a matter of human rights. Menstrual equity. Okay, menstrual equity. The advocacy group, Period, yeah, it's called Period, said in a statement, no student should ever lose learning time due to periods. Period. Oh my God, California. Women's Voices for the Earth say that more than half the states still have menstrual products as a luxury item. No, they don't have menstrual products as a luxury item. They have menstrual products as a matter of responsibility. It is your responsibility. Why are we trying to say to people you aren't responsible? And I know what the response will be by all of you wokey people out there. It'll be, well, it's because they can't afford it. That's nonsense. That's nonsense. This is the same old Democrat talking point, right? People can't afford it. They can't afford it. It's not so. It is a personal responsibility. And when you give up those personal responsibilities, what happens is the state gets more and more involved in your what? Personal life. So in NPR, California will soon require free tampons in public schools. Sacramento, California. California public schools and colleges must stock their restrooms with free menstrual products under a bill signed Friday by Governor Gavin Newsom. The move comes as women's rights advocates push nationwide for affordable access to pads, tampons, and other items. And of course, the other items will never end. California's latest efforts builds on a 2017 law requiring low-income schools in disadvantaged areas to provide students with free menstrual products. It expands the law to include grades 6 to 12. So this article is very similar to the other one. But here's the thing, podcast listeners. The reason why this is the dumbest bill in America, there are a lot of reasons, but the principal reason this is because in K to 12 education, and in California, it's 6 to 12, where these will be provided, these free menstrual products and other products. It's all about saying to boys, not about the girls in California. This is about the boys in California. And saying to boys, you see, we're going to provide you boys, you biological boys, menstrual products. It's free for you. That's really what this is about. It's really not about helping young women in California. This is about further confusing people in K to 12 public school systems and sexualizing children, which is exactly what the public school systems and the Democrats and the school boards and the superintendents across America have been trying to do for years and are, by the way, successfully doing, which is to say to boys, hey, guess what? You're in 6th grade. Don't worry, there are menstrual products in your bathroom, young Johnny, and you don't have to worry because we know that today you're actually not a boy. Today you're actually a girl. And that is what's happening in the public school system. That's exactly why California passed this bill. It's exactly why they did it. And so on CNN, they said California public schools will provide free menstrual products under a new law. And again, they're all trying to trailblaze that this is about women who can't afford them, right? Rather than having the real conversation, which is there are parents and there are children, and the children belong to the parents, and there's a conversation that should occur. And that conversation that should occur should be between the parents and the children about these very personal things. And it is the responsibility of the parents and the children to have those conversations. And I know what you're going to say. Well, there are some parents that don't have those conversations. I have no doubt that it's true, by the way. I have no doubt that's true. And I know many teachers who have helped students who have had forgotten or had their first period and therefore needed assistance. And those teachers are wonderful people and did so and then communicated it very quietly, not just with the student to help them, but also with the parents to help the parents and to talk to the parents about it. That's the way things have always worked in the past, and it's worked just fine. But not anymore. Now it's about, of course, getting the boys to go in. So in CNN, California public schools were required to provide free menstrual products to students under a new law signed by Governor Gavin Newsom. It goes into effect in the 2022 school year, and California recognizes that access to menstrual products is a basic human right and is vital for ensuring the health, dignity, and participation of all Californians in public life. And of course, CNN does their usual wokeness article on that, and this is all tied to transgenderism, ladies and gentlemen. It's not really about helping young women, okay? It's not really about encouraging personal responsibility. No, it's not about saying who's in control, which are the parents. It's about further sexualization of children in public schools, because why else would California pass it? Because that is exactly what California is all about. And that is the dumbest bill in America. And that's it for Mark and the Millennials. Thank you for joining Mark and the Millennials. This is Mark Fisher. Thank you to our producer, Christopher Hopkins. Check us out on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Parler, Rumble, and our website. See you next time.